The ongoing trade tensions between Canada and the United States have once again come into focus as concerns over tariffs on steel and aluminum resurface. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has stressed the serious economic implications such measures could bring, emphasizing that they would not only negatively affect Canada, but also result in job losses within the United States. Reflecting on past occurrences, he pointed out that similar tariffs imposed in 2018 led to a significant reduction in employment, with 75,000 jobs lost in the U.S. due to trade restrictions on steel and aluminum. In response to the growing trade dispute, Trudeau reiterated the importance of safeguarding Canadian businesses and workers. He acknowledged the necessity of taking the U.S. president's statement seriously and assured that Canada would respond with firm but measured actions. Regardless of how the United States proceeds, he made it clear that Canada would act decisively to defend its economic interests, stating that if necessary, certain initiatives could be paused to ensure the protection of Canadian jobs and sovereignty. Beyond addressing potential retaliatory measures, Trudeau strongly denounced the notion that Canada could become the 51st U.S. state. He was unequivocal in rejecting such a proposition, stating that discussions around it were entirely out of the question and reaffirming Canada's commitment to its sovereignty. He insisted that while it was necessary to consider and respond appropriately to the president's rhetoric, Canada remained steadfast in standing up for itself. He highlighted the unity among Canadians in facing these challenges, asserting that the country does not need external validation of its greatness. Recent developments indicate that the United States is set to impose a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports from Canada, effective March 12, 2025. This measure would effectively double the existing levies, raising the total tariff burden on Canadian goods to 50%. The White House has justified these actions by arguing that they are intended to protect America's vital steel and aluminum industries, which have suffered from what it describes as unfair trade practices and global overproduction. As part of efforts to bolster domestic industries, President Trump has reinstated the full 25% tariff on steel imports and increased duties on aluminum to 25%. These reforms include eliminating alternative trade agreements, enforcing stringent standards for steel production, extending tariffs to additional processed products, terminating general tariff exclusions, and cracking down on trade misclassification and duty evasion schemes. In reaction to these developments, prominent Canadian figures have weighed in on the implications of Trump's trade policies and statements. Secretary General Mark Rua Blair described Trump's remarks as offensive, but did not perceive Canada as being under genuine threat. He reaffirmed that Canadians would always stand up for their country and were prepared to take necessary measures to defend their sovereignty, even if that required sacrifices. Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Andrew Furey characterized Trump's ambitions as bordering on imperialistic, suggesting that Canada must prioritize national independence over economic concerns. He stressed that, if necessary, he would be willing to endure economic hardship rather than see Canada annexed by the U.S. Several political leaders, including Prime Minister Trudeau and Defense Minister Bill Blair, have addressed Trump's comments regarding Canada's status. Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party, firmly rejected any notion of Canada becoming a U.S. state, declaring unequivocally that Canada is an independent nation. Elizabeth May, leader of the Green Party, criticized Trump's rhetoric and highlighted the fundamental differences in governance and national identity between Canada and the U.S. In a lighthearted response, she suggested that, if anything, U.S. states such as California, Oregon, and Washington might consider joining Canada instead. Ontario Premier Doug Ford also responded with humor, proposing that Canada could purchase Alaska and Minnesota, reinforcing Canada's independence while dismissing Trump's remarks. Canada plays a critical role as the largest supplier of aluminum to the United States, with its aluminum exports supporting essential industries, particularly in infrastructure and automotive production. Aluminum's lightweight, durable, and corrosion-resistant properties make it invaluable in various sectors. In the automotive industry, aluminum is a key material used to manufacture vehicles, enhancing fuel efficiency and reducing emissions. The aerospace sector also depends heavily on aluminum due to its strength-to-weight ratio, which is crucial for aircraft design and performance. In construction, aluminum is widely used in window frames, roofing, and cladding, providing structural integrity and resilience against environmental conditions. Additionally, the packaging industry relies on aluminum for beverage cans and food containers, capitalizing on its recyclability and ability to preserve freshness. Canadian steel exports are equally significant to the North American industrial economy. Each year, Canada supplies between $3 billion and $4 billion worth of steel to the U.S., accounting for approximately 15% to 20% of total American steel imports. This long-standing trade partnership is built on deeply integrated supply chains, ensuring that Canadian steel supports multiple industries. In construction, Canadian steel is essential for infrastructure projects such as bridges, skyscrapers, and residential buildings due to its high durability and strength. The automotive industry depends on Canadian steel for vehicle frames and safety features, helping manufacturers meet rigorous safety and reliability standards. The energy sector is another major consumer, utilizing Canadian steel for pipeline construction and drilling equipment essential for North America's expanding energy infrastructure. Additionally, industrial manufacturing relies on Canadian steel for producing heavy machinery, tools, and industrial systems that drive various sectors forward. Rather than being a one-sided dependency, the economic relationship between Canada and the United States is one of mutual benefit. Canada remains a crucial supplier of steel and aluminum to American industries, playing an integral role in the U.S. economy. Ohio, for instance, benefits significantly from Canadian imports, contributing billions of dollars annually to its economy. Any disruption to this trade flow, such as the imposition of tariffs, could lead to increased costs for businesses and consumers on both sides of the border. The economic integration between the two nations ensures industrial stability and job creation, underscoring the importance of maintaining a balanced trade partnership. Canada serves as a vital supplier of essential commodities to the United States, including oil, electricity, metals, and food. Any abrupt halt in these exports would lead to significant economic disruptions, impacting energy security, industrial output, and food prices. This analysis explores the potential consequences of such a scenario, using data and historical precedents to evaluate its impact. The effects on U.S. energy would be particularly severe. Canada is one of the largest suppliers of crude oil to the U.S., accounting for a substantial portion of its overall consumption. Much of this oil is processed in American refineries and distributed across the country, making it a crucial element of the U.S. energy infrastructure. A sudden cessation of Canadian oil exports would create an immediate supply deficit, causing sharp increases in crude oil and refined fuel prices, such as gasoline and diesel. Historical trends indicate that even a 25% tariff on Canadian oil could lead to a 35-cent per gallon rise in gasoline costs. A complete halt in imports would likely result in even steeper price surges, especially in regions like the Midwest, which heavily rely on Canadian crude for refining and fuel supply. This energy crisis would not only strain consumers, but also raise operational costs for businesses and industries that depend on fuel. Beyond oil, Canada is also a major provider of electricity to the U.S., particularly to states like New York, Vermont, and Michigan, where hydropower from Quebec and Ontario plays a key role in energy supply. Ontario alone supplies enough electricity to power over 1 million U.S. homes. If this electricity flow were to be interrupted, affected states would face energy shortages and increased costs, forcing them to seek alternatives such as coal or natural gas, which are both more expensive and environmentally damaging. In colder months, when heating demand rises, a sudden loss of Canadian electricity could leave portions of the northern U.S. vulnerable to power outages and energy insecurity. The disruption would not be limited to energy alone. The industrial sector would also face serious consequences. Canada supplies essential metals and minerals to the U.S., including steel and aluminum, which are critical for industries such as automotive manufacturing, aerospace, and construction. In 2023 alone, the U.S. imported over $31.5 billion worth of minerals and metals from Canada, marking a 16% increase from the previous year. Many of these materials are deeply embedded within U.S. supply chains, making them difficult to replace. Canadian aluminum, in particular, plays a key role in vehicle manufacturing, and a sudden halt in exports would create severe material shortages, production delays, and cost increases for American manufacturers. Companies would be forced to look for alternative suppliers in countries like China, Brazil, or Australia, but these options would come with additional expenses due to tariffs, extended shipping times, and geopolitical uncertainties. The automotive sector would be among the hardest hit since it relies heavily on Canadian steel and aluminum for vehicle production. The construction industry, which depends on these metals for large-scale infrastructure projects, would also experience significant setbacks, potentially delaying major developments and raising costs for both private and public sector initiatives. The food supply chain would likewise be severely impacted. Canada is a major agricultural exporter to the U.S., supplying key food products such as beef, pork, vegetable oils, wheat, and various fruits and vegetables that are crucial to the American food industry. If these exports were to be disrupted, grocery stores, restaurants, and food processing businesses across the U.S. would feel the effects almost immediately. Meat and dairy products would be particularly affected, as Canada is a leading supplier of beef and pork. Reduced supply would lead to increased meat prices, affecting both retailers and food service providers. Additionally, Canadian wheat and grain exports are essential for producing staples such as bread and pasta. A disruption in supply would lead to higher costs for these basic food items, further straining household budgets. Another major impact would be on the availability of fresh produce. Canada exports significant quantities of fruits, vegetables, and processed food items to the U.S., and any supply shortage would drive up prices and limit access to certain food products. For lower-income families, who already allocate a larger portion of their income to food, these price increases would create additional financial hardship. Beyond the immediate economic effects, halting Canadian exports would trigger broader financial instability. Canada and the U.S. share one of the largest trading relationships in the world, with over $900 billion in annual trade between the two countries. A sudden loss of Canadian imports would destabilize American industries, drive inflation, and create uncertainty in financial markets. The U.S. would be forced to find new suppliers for oil, electricity, metals, and food, but these alternatives would likely be more expensive and less reliable. Politically, such disruptions would place tremendous pressure on the U.S. government to negotiate a resolution, as trade disputes and retaliatory tariffs would likely emerge, escalating tensions and complicating diplomatic relations. Certain U.S. states, such as Michigan, Texas, and New York, which rely heavily on Canadian imports, would experience disproportionate economic hardships, potentially influencing both state and federal policy decisions. The economic strain would spread across multiple sectors, leading to energy shortages, higher industrial costs, food price inflation. Historical evidence suggests that such trade disputes can have long-term negative consequences. The last major round of tariffs in 2018 demonstrated that protectionist measures can backfire, even for the country implementing them. The tariffs placed on imported raw materials, including steel and aluminum, led to increased costs for American manufacturers. Many businesses were forced to reduce operations, cut jobs, or pass on price hikes to consumers. In response, Canada imposed retaliatory tariffs on key U.S. exports, further intensifying the economic fallout. A new wave of tariffs could bring even greater consequences, given that the proposed restrictions are expected to be more severe than those of 2018. The trade relationship between Canada and the U.S. is deeply interwoven, with industries on both sides of the border dependent on stable supply chains. The imposition of new tariffs would not only hurt Canadian suppliers, but would also directly impact U.S. manufacturers that rely on Canadian raw materials. Increased costs for steel and aluminum would leave American companies with difficult choices, either absorb the added expenses or pass them on to consumers, ultimately slowing economic growth and reducing industrial competitiveness. The economic consequences of such disruptions highlight the importance of maintaining a stable and cooperative trade partnership between Canada and the United States. Ensuring a reliable flow of goods between the two nations is essential for economic stability, industrial efficiency, and consumer affordability. Periodic trade disputes and policy shifts have demonstrated the fragility of this interdependence, reinforcing the need for long-term solutions that promote economic collaboration rather than protectionism. Trudeau emphasized that Canada will not passively accept unfair trade measures and is fully prepared to respond strategically to any economic challenges. His government is committed to taking a measured yet resolute stance in addressing the impact of trade restrictions. The Team Canada approach involves a unified diplomatic effort, with Canadian officials, ministers, and provincial leaders actively engaging their American counterparts in discussions to prevent the implementation of tariffs. Should diplomatic efforts prove unsuccessful, Canada is ready to enact economic countermeasures, including imposing retaliatory tariffs on American industries that heavily rely on Canadian exports. At the same time, the Canadian government is broadening its trade relationships beyond North America by strengthening partnerships with Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Through the expansion of trade agreements, Canada seeks to decrease its economic reliance on the U.S. market and shield itself from the risks associated with unpredictable American trade policies. Trudeau reiterated that Canada will not be pressured into policy decisions that do not align with its interests and will continue to pursue a trade strategy that prioritizes national economic stability. This approach is designed with two primary objectives. First, to engage in diplomatic discussions to prevent a full-scale trade conflict, and second, to establish economic safeguards that protect Canadian jobs and industries. By investing in domestic production, diversifying its trading partners, and strengthening its economic resilience, Canada is positioning itself to mitigate the effects of potential trade disruptions. Additionally, there is an increasing focus on reinforcing North American security alliances, including NORAD and NATO, to highlight Canada's vital role as a strategic ally to the United States. Trudeau made it clear that while Canada remains committed to maintaining a strong economic relationship with the U.S., it will not hesitate to take action to protect its national interests should unfair trade policies be introduced. That concludes this video. Thank you for watching. We truly appreciate your time. If this content resonated with you or provided valuable insight, we would greatly appreciate your support by liking the video and subscribing to stay engaged with our community. What are your thoughts on the future of Canada-US trade relations? Share your perspective in the comments below. Your support means a great deal to us. You can also check out another video from our channel, now appearing on your screen.